This is to address the direct parallel between the so-called good Germans of World War II, who all claimed they helped the Jews and didn't know what was being done to them, and what it means to be an American protesting Palestine being bombed again by America's administrative colonial outpost in the Middle East, an ethnically biased chauvinist group of people. And in defense of these good Germans, I do want to say that many of them are like the sailors caught on the USS Liberty. Their values are being fired upon and they're getting no help. And so they've taken to the streets in dismay. To turn back the clock a little bit, in the 80s, I came to realize that something was culturally going wrong with Israeli American society. And I was targeted by them. And I lost in peer relations the dispute, partly because I'm deaf and have no defense against whisper campaigns, manufacture of the sort that they had engaged in. And it did cross my path. What was happening in Palestine was a major affront to human rights. I had lived long enough and seen enough pot shots being taken at innocent Palestinian children to realize that Palestinian rights were not being taken seriously enough by the international community. I thought, in part because of Jimmy Carter's work, that Palestinian existence was at least in safe hands with people in Congress. Watching Israeli excesses, making sure they didn't overdo it, even though, of course, I lived through sovereign Shantilla. I knew what the Israelis were capable of. It was one sleazy incident, unforgettable and historic though it may be. Faced with the incredible treachery on October 7th, 2023, I settled on my explanation for what went wrong, which is that Hamas extremists pulled the attack and massacre on the supernova rave in the spirit that the Seattle supernova rave, the Seattle rave massacre took place, which was done by a MAGA type. In other words, it was an insidious cluster of speculators who were agreeing behind the scenes at the crapboard table to cleanse Gaza for future developments. And that's why the Kingdom of Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt have whistled Dixie through the whole thing. Well, what gives with Nosferatu? What's he doing? What does he think? Well, the contempt of international law is plain as day. Everybody can see that the international law's lack of enforcement was seen as and making them a plaything. But I happen to have been raised in a Holocaust survivor community and have kin, next of kin, who are Jewish from half marriages of divorced parents. And I was given a book to read by Nosferatu's darling, Gail Burstyn, when they sent me the Universal Rave Massacre letters called Gail Burstyn. And the book I was given to read was That Was Then, This Is Now. And the moral of That Was Then, This Is Now is I just wanted to make sure that I hated you. Pittsburgh streets in East Liberty, where the Zionist neighborhood took place, among Italian greasers who were lighting cars on fire and tipping them over to protest busing, and tore my head off as a child for being in favor of integration in the civil rights movement. Were kids who made the unwillingness and inability to fight back, weakness and fear, proof of the justification to do it. They used to say, some people said of the Jews, they went to their fate like sheep. Well, the East End of Pittsburgh is the kind of place where such a idea, they went to their deaths like sheep, would catch on. They were up against a clear and present danger. I was not. It was very difficult to tell what was going on. I laid low trying to figure it out, figuring if I ever got to the bottom of it, then I could seek help. I did report it to the principal's office and the police and various other people. That didn't do any good, so we moved away. But the British were inventing a cosmic super story about the legitimacy and ultimatum given to children to be child soldiers and stuff. It's sort of a Russian idea. So the Jews around me made clear they thought I was like the appeasers, selling my soul to get a day of safety from the Hitlers that they were. So that was then, this is now's moral. I just wanted to make sure that I hated you. It's the moral of Israel about America. By bombing Gaza and seeing us stand for it, the Israelis tell themselves and each other, that's what America did when it was us being subjected to genocidal aggression and pleading for help. And we hate them because they stood by and watched. Nosferatu is sly and obscure, and seeing us sell out the children of Gaza makes him say, that's why I hate you. And America is the victim. The entire American intelligence system has been fired on like the USS Liberty, not by Yemen. Yemen is trying to protect the valor of the United States. Their hearts are broken. Israel is firing on the USS Cole. They've done it by putting Yemen back to the walls. Yemen are afraid. But they realize that they're watching children being murdered in mass and it being glorified. And very powerful agencies saying that the glorification of the genocide of a nation half made of children, indiscriminate or discriminate purposeful targeting of children, is somehow moral and just. And the indecency of their minds is too deranged for them to endure it. But it's not them who's firing on the USS Cole. It's Israel using them as an involuntary proxy. They don't want to be in the situation America is in, where hatred for them is justified and the only possible recourse is resistance by law. They're following international law. Their police, women particularly, and some of them lose their lives for being diplomatic. Use violence against suspects and even dangerous suspects is a very last resort. That's a story that doesn't come out very often. The people of Yemen who are firing on those who are escorting Israeli ships to their destination of monstrosity are police who have their back to the wall, who've been given no choice by a dangerous assailant. No choice by a dangerous assailant, but to resist in order to protect the innocent. And for some reason, so many of us cannot see that or understand. I wonder why. It's true they used me in a series of ordeals like a plaything so that they could say, well, if you were so moral, why don't you stop looking at beautiful girls in cornucopias of lovemaking as a way of distancing yourself from the garden of earthly delights that we inhabit. I backed off from the dating game because of how I was used. So it's true that there's some question of Islamic attitudes about women showing their breasts and so forth. I don't know how to answer those things except that I realize they're not being answered by ideology. Nobody has ever come over to me and said, we want you as a teacher. So stop looking at porno, because there's considerations when it comes to online life. What are your duties when homes are being invaded? Is it to protect privacy? Is it to negotiate for fair treatment for deaf library clerks? I said, why don't you talk to me about it? Tell me that you want the benefit of my opinion. Why don't you consider paying me for my work and my injuries? And there's this idea that I'm a rave individual. So Israel and Hamas are both targeting me then, is the story. And you hate me because I'm an American liberal. And you'll get the gossips to get right-wing extremists from the USS Liberty to say, who is this creep, right? And the Israelis made sure that they hated me by tucking the Burstyn letters into my stuff so that I would be running around saying, I want to be Mick Jagger, I want to be Mick Jagger. I don't. I never really did. But I'm sorry that people have one standard for me and one standard for themselves, because so far as I know, I'm not the only person who had more than one lover in my life. I've even read beautiful stories of men who married women who were widows with children in Gaza. I certainly don't have anything against the men of Gaza at all. I think they're fantastic people. Absolutely fantastic. I can't bear to see the injury being inflicted on them. It's horrifying to me. They need an international community to prosecute Israeli intransigence towards innocent people. Maybe the Zionists won't hate us anymore if we stand up to them. Because the message is clearly our refusal to stand up for the children of Gaza is making them hate us more and more, because they keep firing more and more at the USS Liberty. Yemen isn't a proxy of Israel. That's not what I'm saying. Their backs are to the wall. They've taken America hostage, these Israelis. And they're getting people who can see what's going on desperate enough to try to stop us. That's not a good legacy for America. It's strange they call the media system that's in place legacy media, because legacy media, as it's meant by that, are nothing but a commercial for this stuff. And of course, it gets eerie when you get into the verse and letters in the story that John Lennon somehow promoted his own killers because of support for Israeli girls. It gets eerie. It makes it very difficult to stop and think about what has happened. Well, what the assassination of anybody who's a raver really means in light of Gail Burstyn. And so you're forced to pick a side between two factions that look like they were involved in it. Gail Burstyn has never had anyone from the Arabic community identify and oppose her. The Palestinian feminists who are abandoned, unfortunately and sadly, by the feminist community of the world, hitch their mules to the feminazism of Gail Burstyn in the 80s towards me. And I think that the British got off on the idea of putting a humanist in the position of having to vie intellectually with extreme theology and an issue of genocide. I don't see the excitement of that. They sent in Derek Parfit, the author of The Repugnant Conclusion, to the University of Pittsburgh when I was studying Buckminster Fuller, who unfortunately was given to me by one of the perpetrators. And it was as if sustainable development was like, like that old Italian joke in East Liberty. What are we going to name the baby? And the guy pulls off the rubber and ties the knot and throws it at her and says, if he gets out of that, we'll call him Houdini. If you get out of that, you can adjust, you can go build a geodesic dome, queer wall. Climate change is a contempt when it's an afterthought. The Society for Human Ecology was a parochial situation. CIA were saying, oh, get bent with your ecology when your behavior is the kind of thing. You're a walrus, queerball. They came from the Salk research team. Now you know that all that stuff is accurate and factual. I've always felt that trying to save the lives of the people who were at risk of HIV and dignify the condition of people living with HIV was very, very important. But you can't get the administration of groups like the Sandbaggers online who went along with it. even if they're protesting Gaza, to credit white liberal commitment to the education and protection of the public. They never acknowledged my father was a school bus driver. They never acknowledged that he was involved in African education. They never acknowledged even that I'm deaf, that I tried in a timely way to get to avant-garde media folklore heroes to say something immediately while Reagan was still in power about what was happening. They had it all figured out. We'll just hotwire around that by saying we represent John Lennon. And there you have the whole story with Ming No Wen and her rave massacre that Jaime Carbonell called the Carrot Tape. That was a rave massacre. It was some gurgle from the ancient memories of being molested as a child by the patrons and dancers at Climax One. A hidden tape of memory. These people don't care about education. They did this as a laugh against the philosophy of education, to show that they were more almighty than the public trust. And they wanted to be seen as a multifaceted diamond of intellectual achievement. What's to celebrate? We'll move on, and afterwards we will glow with the inner light. Makes me pretty gloomy, I must say.